Welcome to Anchoring the Consciousness of Oneness World Summit. And our guest for this segment is our host. Her name is Sara Daves, and we will be talking about finding your purpose. When self is known, all is known. Hi, Sara.
Hi, Todd.
This is fun to be talking to you and seeing you at the same time.
Yeah.
So we've just had a series of conversations about purpose, and I would love to hear just what that means to you. Why are you a purpose coach?
Okay. All right. So I came into my own purpose a couple of years ago, and I did it in a way that was really uncomfortable. And that's kind of how it goes most of the time. You know, it's like you find yourself in a major transition or any type of life crisis, and then you begin questioning everything that you've ever done. And so one of the things that I talk about in the workshops that I do with women is either you hurt enough that you have to change, or you learn enough that you want to. And so, so one of the reasons that I do this work is to support people in the learning about themselves, so they can make the changes that they want to make. And purpose, what I mean, or what that looks like, how that's defined for me, and how I explain that to others is it's not just one thing that you do. It's the journey is the destination. So we're never going to be finished. We're always going to grow and change and have new desires and goals. But it's pretty important to recognize when you have made decisions based on what was expected of you in the family system, in the school system, in the working world, whatever that looks like for you. We are born with natural, like innate talents, gifts, and abilities. Sometimes that is not known. Sometimes you don't know what that is for you if you've never been introduced to it. For instance, I'll give you an example. There's an abilities test that I do. It's called the Highlands Ability Battery Test. And if you have a high rhythm memory, then you're probably going to be able to keep a beat. You can dance, you can play the drums, but you also can't sit still for very long. About an hour is all you've got. Walking meetings do wonders for you. You can also, when you're sitting and resting, your mind can turn off. And so that's a good candidate for meditation. So, it's not just, in finding your purpose and like what you're supposed to do in the world to make money, or how you're supposed to go out and help others. I help people discover who they really are. It's like we have all these layers of stuff on us, all these beliefs, all these values that we feel like we should embody that don't really belong to us. And so that can cause fragmentation in a person. And that's not showing up as a whole person. That's like pieces of you, kind of moving in different directions, and that's creating tension and then a vague sense of unfulfillment.
So when these people you work with find their path of purpose, I like that it's not a destination, it's a path. Do things just get easy from there on out? Is the path without obstacles? And I imagine they do experience a sense of freedom. What kind of feedback do you get on what it's like to be on your purpose path?
Purpose path. I like that. Yeah. So you can't predict what's going to happen in your life. Just look at mine. I couldn't have predicted anything that has happened in the last 3 years. And it's really not about preventing things from happening to you, or avoiding uncomfortable situations or painful situations. It's more about learning how to deal with them, you know. And so in understanding like how you operate, you know, the individual, okay, so everyone's operating in a very different way. Um, we're all moving through the world differently and experiencing the world very differently. And so the more you know about yourself, the more you naturally know what's going on around you. It's like, I feel like I'm getting off topic here a little bit, but this is taking me to this place. Um, yeah, so so because it's a journey and not the destination, you have to know that there are going to be times where you're going to feel really uncomfortable in stretching yourself.
So, Sarah, over the time that I've known you, I've gotten to hear your story about how you've gotten to this point where you have so much to offer other people as they are working towards finding their true path. I was wondering if you were willing to share with our audience that story.
Yes, yeah. So, yeah, and how I came to be a purpose coach. So, 3 years ago, my son died. That's not the beginning of this journey for sure. But that happened. And he was 23 years old, and he had just come home from a 5-year prison sentence for a crime that he did not commit, that he was coerced into pleading guilty to. And so I had a lot of resentment and a lot of pent up anger and a lot of feelings of hopelessness in him too. Very confused. I raised him in what I like to call a bubble, um, a gated planned community that had everything you could possibly want. And he never really wanted for anything. And we had a very close community connection. And if someone would have told me that that could have happened to him or would happen to him, I would have laughed and said, that's ridiculous. That will not happen to my son. He graduated from high school at 16 years old and started college. And then he ended up getting tripped up into the justice system at a time where the economy tanked and I couldn't afford a lawyer for him. I was a single mom and we were struggling. And that's when this happened. So one of the things that it's all very confusing. You know, you work hard, you know, you provide a life for your family, and then all of a sudden it can be taken away in an instant. So one of the things that I was thinking about is prisons, you know, and becoming privatized. Like the goal isn't to create public safety; the goal is to make money. And so people, and this has been going on for quite some time, right? People are just getting plucked off the street and put into prison beds. Well, that's been happening to, you know, African Americans and anyone of color for a long time. I mean, that like every friend I have said that their parents sat them down and said, listen, you're not completely safe going out of the house. And so this is how you operate when you're stopped by a police officer, because, you know, your life can be at risk. I never said that. I said, the police officers are your friends. And, you know, I never knew to say anything like that. And so this is not a new problem. But with the privatizing of prison systems, it absolutely is becoming a bigger and different problem. And so it doesn't matter what color you are anymore. I'm not ever saying that was an awful thing and still is, but everyone's being affected. And so if you don't know what you don't know, then how do you do anything about it? That was not our experience. And then it became our experience. So 5 years went by. And during that 5-year period, my son was in a level 3 prison system, which is where murderers go at 18 years old. He became the internal litigator for inmates who received charges on the inside, and he was the sole person doing that, and very busy as a result. He also pulled together a volunteer group to put together baseball teams, and also like fix up the volleyball court and make that something. So he was busy doing stuff, you know. And he would tell me, he would say, you know, these guys in here, like, they're, you know, it's so unfair, you know, like this, you know, this African-American man, he's 32 years old. He's going to be in here for the rest of his life. And when he was a teenager, he made some stupid decision and didn't mean to hurt anybody, but accidentally did. And therefore now he's here. And he would just, he would sob, you know, the level of compassion that he received from being in that situation was the gift. Because there's a gift in every single thing, right? But yeah, so he came home and 6 weeks later he died. And so while that seems so incredibly unfair, that took me on a healing journey. I could not just fall down into the pit of nothingness and grief and exist there. That's not something that he would have wanted for me, I know. And I didn't want to let him down. And so I started to walk down that journey, like walk down the path of healing. And so, and also thinking about like, what can I do to make sure this doesn't happen to another person, you know? The only thing that I could really think about is the fact that our system is broken. And with the conflict resolution background that I have, I know that hurt people, and that broken systems break people. And so our system is set up to create a separation. It's set up for blame and punishment. It's not set up to resolve conflicts in a healthy way. And as a result of that, you know, I'm thinking about like, who needs to pay for this? Well, that doesn't make any sense with what I feel inside, you know, like, I don't want anyone to suffer. I want to be understood. I want my son's life to mean something. And I mean, of course it did. It meant something to so many people who knew him. But I didn't want his life, the past 5 years of his life, to just happen for nothing. And I'm not saying it didn't, because I'm sure that there were a lot of people that he touched in the 5 years. But people need to know about this, right? And this is something that the African-American community has been, you know, screaming for centuries. Like, so this isn't new. You know, so then where does that leave me, right? I don't know. But that's a totally different topic, I think. But in going through all of that and trying to figure out, like, how do I make sure that this doesn't happen again? Well, I can't. That's impossible. I can't like change the system, right? But I can start to do something. And the more I created the space for the knowing of that. I wasn't like actively seeking it. I was just kind of creating the space to know. I, I just started going within and noticing that the more I went within and the more I learned about myself, the easier it was to walk through life. The more I knew intuitively which actions to take to do what I wanted to do. Like I knew I wanted to make a change, but I didn't know how. I didn't know what it was supposed to be. And I just got led there. I wasn't like writing a list, and then checking boxes. It just happened organically. And over, the next couple of years, I started coaching women. Now I'll coach anyone, but women are the ones who come to me. They're the ones that want to know like who they are or find the validation in what they always thought was true, but was told that it maybe wasn't true about them. And then to uncover hidden talents and do something with their life that is meaningful. So yeah, that's how I got started in doing that.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge how much courage that takes to tell that story for a bunch of people who you do not know. I'm the punitive elements of the system, not just the judicial system, but just the way we operate in our culture is rewards and punishments. And I'm curious as to how you didn't get punitive with yourself. How did you do that work of not blaming yourself, not finding fault in something you did as a parent? Where was that healing?
Oh yeah. So, I mean, as parents, you just naturally, especially as a mom, I think, it's like we have this inherent guilt. So we're going to feel guilty over everything anyway. My son and I had a profound connection. I mean, as I'm sure all parents do with their children, right? We were very close. I gave him the space to speak his truth because that's how I grew up. I was allowed to do that. And so it just came natural. But like he could challenge me, and so we were very real with one another, and I was not willing to take those memories of our being together for all those years and ruining it with blame. There's just no place for that. We are still inextricably connected, and we never were going to be otherwise. And I knew that. How, I don't know, but I knew that. And I don't know, I think that part of it too was some of the education that I got in conflict resolution. Like there's really no room for blame. It doesn't serve a purpose, except actually it doesn't serve any positive purpose, and I think that like I've talked to so many parents who have lost their children, and many of them are kind of stuck in the grief or stuck in feeling very bitter or stuck in a very guilty space. And the energy is really heavy around them, and nobody should have to live like that. Yeah, I don't know. I just have so much faith in my connection with my son. I could never beat myself up like that. Because I feel like it would impact him in some way. I just wouldn't want to do that. Yeah.
you wouldn't beat up the system or the prosecutors or the doctors or the other people involved either?
Well, okay, so the way he died was he went out to a bar with friends and they drank a lot. And his a friend of his, if you want to call him that, injected drugs into his arm and then watched him die and didn't call the police and didn't call 911. And so what could I have done? What could I have done about that? Could I have filed criminal charges? Maybe I could. What would happen at that point? He would go and possibly the kid would go to prison like my son did. That doesn't solve anything, right? You know, the prosecutors are also, they're just pawns in the system. And so how do you blame? I mean, they're just doing their job, right? So how do you place blame there? And the judge, like what, I mean, he's just doing his job too in the system that we have. And we say, oh, this is the best system. This is the best system that we know of. So if you don't know what you don't know, then, I mean, there's no point. There's no point in any of that. Really, it's like the system to me is designed like the ego. Like you can't get rid of the ego. I'm not saying that we can't create change. It's just designed to support itself and not us. And so if we're wanting support, for ourselves, our families, our communities, so we can live in our joy that we all have within, then that's where our focus should be. It shouldn't be on trying to fix a system that's not functioning properly. It should be on fixing ourselves and healing ourselves, and then being a shining example for others, and I don't know. I don't see, there's no one to pay for this. I can't think of one. That never makes anybody feel better anyway, does it?
But I'm guessing you still had a lot of anger, even if you were not getting stuck in the blaming pattern. What did you do with that anger?
Yes, I had a lot of anger. So what I did was I started practicing yoga every day. I started meditating every day. I just got really quiet. I started manufacturing happiness. That was one thing that I did too. I decided that I was going to make my life as happy as it could possibly be, which would never be as happy or fulfilling without my son, but I could make it the best it could be. And that's what he would have wanted me to do. And so that's what I started to do. And I started taking action. And so that was kind of checking the boxes. Okay, so what do I need to be happy? Well, society says that I should be married. So let me go ahead and check that box. I already knew that the corporate life wasn't for me. So I was like, okay, well, now I can start, my entrepreneurial path. And so let me check that box. And so it wasn't something that I was called to do necessarily. It was more of like, this is what a healthy, happy human being looks like in moving through life. And so I got married, and it was another part of my healing journey. It fell apart very quickly, and I found myself in really just very confused about, like, how could all of this have happened to me in such a short period of time, and um, and what does it all mean? So um, the
Check.
anger turned to confusion is what happened.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and I rested there in confusion for quite some time. And so the only thing again that I could do was go within and develop, I guess, the recognition that everything that I was seeing in the external world was really going on within myself. Um, the world was my mirror. So there's a lot of, like, when I say, oh, I'm just going to decide to be happy. Well, that means I'm stuffing emotions, like I'm not going to fall into a grief pit. So I just stuffed all that down, and then it started to show up in my external reality in very toxic ways. Um, and so there again, there's lessons in that. And so one of the biggest ones was not blaming other people for, everything that's happened to me or to my son, right? Um, this is not easy to talk about. So I'm getting a little tripped up.
Yeah. So what I hear is that following a rule book and checking off the boxes as a path to purpose does not always, or doesn't work out so well. But I can understand the inclination, because you had just something had happened, something traumatic had happened so far outside of your control. So I'm going to take control and do things that are good for me and not damaging to anyone else. And then it seems like you reached another limit, that you had to go a little bit deeper inside yourself.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, so I had to sit with the fact that I'm teaching or helping to teach um, conflict resolution and a different way of a different social system, and creating that and helping people experience that mind shift and not and walk my talk, really. So not blaming, not wanting people to pay for what has happened, but truly having an understanding that hurt people. So, and then broken systems break people. And truly, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, you can't really ever get it wrong, right? So I'm thinking about my son and what he went through. And so, well, he was wronged, or maybe he made a decision to hang out with the person, that would ultimately end his life, and that was a bad decision. But you can't get it wrong. It's not the end here, so in this, in our human bodies. So I truly believe that souls know when they are ready to pass on and to leave this 3D reality and be birthed into another place, because um,
Sarah, I'm struck by uh, I've been operating with this filter recently of seeing the cycles that we all get caught in, not just in a personal level, but at a systemic level, the cycles. And your son initiating these programs and being an intermediator and an advocate in prison, he was stopping cycles of his own while he was stuck in one that was not of his doing. And then to hear you talk about those choices that you made to, I'm not going to get into a blaming cycle. I'm not going to get into a should, what I have to do cycle. There's a beauty to the stopping. And now it seems you're so beyond just the stopping. You've been starting something. So this purpose work, I feel that connection to healing, because if we all are broken people in broken systems, we need to clear away some of that stuff that builds up around our heart in order to know purpose. But what are other elements of moving towards purpose in addition to healing?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about I'm thinking about the theme of this summit, of oneness, right? And if we're all connected and we're not doing well ourselves, what is that doing to the collective? So because we are all connected and we all are divine aspects of universal consciousness, all of the answers are within. They're all right here. That's where the joy is, your happiness and peace, and the knowingness. So if life is here trying to know itself through all of these unique aspects, which are us, then it does a service to everyone to know who you are, right? Because you're experiencing, you're having a very unique experience in this lifetime. You're different than anyone else. It might look the same, but that's just your reality. So, so everyone's living their own movie or living that out. And since we are so connected, noticing that what's going on in the external world is a direct reflection of what's going on inside of you. That's the other clue that we're connected. So when you change within, you see that in your external world. So when I was stuffing down all of these emotions, and not moving through them and not being very real with myself, I started noticing toxicity out in the outer world. Okay. And the more I came home to myself and the more I listened and created the space for a knowingness to come, the more beautiful my outer world became. And so that's what I'm talking about with the purpose. Like when you can let go of all of these things that don't belong to you, like all of the values systems that you were taught in your family dynamic that might not align with you and your spirit or your soul's design, or in school, when you're taught that there's no alternative to conflict other than punishment. I mean, there's a lot of things, right? You may have been told, girls aren't good at math. I don't know. I mean, it could be anything. When you start letting all that go, all the gunk that this our social structures pile on us, when we can let that go, then we can really step into ourselves, and the purpose just comes. I mean, it's not like you've got to go and search for this purpose. It's just knowing yourself. You know, it's like if you can just let all that go and do some self-validation, and that, you know, I am good at this thing, and it is meaningful regardless of what I was told in the third grade, you know. Yeah, and letting all that go, then you can shine your light and be that example for other people. Um, and that is doing a huge service in the world. So every person who is letting go of these all that stuff, and kind of stepping away from the social structure a little bit, you know, and saying, okay, maybe we don't have to participate in, you know, in these things. Like maybe, like for me, like maybe I don't have to send this boy to prison, right? Maybe he will come to me when he's ready, and he'll ask for forgiveness, and I will love him. You know, maybe that will happen instead. Um, yeah, it's really interesting how all of this ties together. And I couldn't have predicted it for anything. And so, you know, we don't get to know until we're in it, right?
You mentioned making space for the knowing to come. Did you do that intentionally?
Probably not at first. I think I was a bit broken and didn't know. But I think that the conflict resolution teachings that I went through was really helpful, because I was, you know, it's like we want justice, right? I mean, what a strange word that is. That means a lot of things, but that's what we want. And so the only way that we know how to get it is through the systems that we operate in. And so, but that doesn't align with the teachings of conflict resolution, you know, that I've been taught, you know. So there's a disconnect. And I was trying to move through that logically. And while that was working on some level, it still wasn't feeling whole. And so I don't know, I just kind of gave up, and I said, do whatever you want, you know, just guide me, because I don't know what to do anymore, you know. So I'm just, you know, it was almost like I didn't know what else to do. And so I asked for help, and I let go. So I guess it was on purpose on a lot of levels, but it wasn't because I just decided. I mean, I really didn't feel like I had any other alternative but to ask. Yeah.
The phrase is going to stick with me is purpose will come to you. I wish I would have known that years ago. The image that came to me, and I've talked to many other people who feel like this compulsion to find our purpose, to find that one thing that we're supposed to be doing, or that will bring us happiness, or where everything will fall into sync. It feels like I'm a hunter scanning the horizon with a scope, looking for where that purpose is, and how much work that is, and how much horizon you see without seeing the object you're looking for. And it moves, it doesn't stay in one place. But the idea that purpose is right there, that I don't need to focus externally on it. That's beautiful, and the world needs to hear that.
Yeah, it's not out there. It's never, everything that's out here is just a reflection of what's going on in here. You know, And so that's hard to sit with because, you know, if you feel wronged, right? Or if you know that you were victimized by a situation, right? Well, what does that look like? I mean, that really what that is not taking responsibility for your inner state or your life circumstance. And that's a hard thing for people to hear too, but it is the truth because like I was telling you the other day, I feel like Job. I really do. I've lost everything. Like, you know, like what else could I possibly lose? You know, after my son passed away, my dad died. And then my son Trey, his father, died a year later. So all the men, you know, and that was, I mean, he was my family, you know, and we weren't together, but he was my family. I loved him. And he was the only other person on the planet who loved my son as much as I did, you know? So that was many huge losses. You know, and then I didn't go back to my corporate job where I made a lot of money. And, you know, my marriage failed utterly. And I nearly lost everything that I worked so hard for, you know, in the material, right? So what else is there to lose? Nothing. And then what's left? Me. That's it, you know? And that wasn't so bad, really, you know? I mean, you know, it's because I feel that we as individuals are inextricably connected to everything else. So I still feel very connected to everything. To everyone who's passed. You know, I feel grateful for the pain that I've gone through because it has given me gifts on the other side. If I hadn't gone through a failed marriage during my grief, there were wounds that I didn't even know existed that popped up that I was finally able to heal. And that never would have happened without that. I mean, so we should really, I don't like to say should, but we can take any experience and we can choose how we're going to look at it and how we're going to feel about it and what we're going to do about it. You know, and so it's a very comfortable place, sitting in a place where you're feeling victimized, you know, because you don't have to do too much. You're giving the responsibility to somebody else. You handle that. You fix it, you know, and that's giving your power away. And if you're not in your power, you can't know your purpose. I mean, your purpose is always there. It's just uncovering it. But if you don't step into that power, then you don't get to know that.
So talk to me about that, stepping into our power. I imagine some of it is discarding that which does not serve us. What else is involved from your perspective in stepping into our power? And knowing that you have been through so much, it would be reasonable to say stepping into my calmness or stepping into a sense of inner peace, the power that's got a punch.
Yeah. I would say stepping into compassion, you know, finding compassion for yourself. That's where it starts, I think. I think if you can find compassion for yourself, then that just creates the space, right? For the awareness. I'm not talking about creating space because something's going to pop in, so you just have to wait for it, and then here, you know, it's going to come, and here it is. No, it's not so easy. Really, it's just being aware. So the more aware you are, the more information you have. I mean, we all know that, right? I mean, you can sit and you can watch something external happen and be very focused on that, and then you'll have a lot more information on that external happening as if you hadn't sorry, you have a lot more awareness of the what's going on in the external if you're paying attention. If you're not paying attention, you have less awareness. Okay, so it's the same on the inside. So if you're very aware of what's going on inside of you, so how you're feeling in a particular moment, even, and instead of just allowing your body or mind to react to something, um, instead ask yourself, what is this feeling and what do I need to know about this in this moment? The answer comes because the answer's there, right? But you have to ask. And so it's about paying attention to what's going on within. And when you can do that, the purpose is uncovered. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm going to get back to oneness. So for those of you who are watching, this was Sarah's idea to do this summit. Sara has put so much energy and thought and time into this, and I just would love if you could share why did you make that investment? Why are you making that investment?
Well, it wasn't my idea. It was an idea that was given to me. It just came. I've learned from going within and creating that space for awareness, that, I mean, and it's not something that I just have or some people have. We all have this ability. But my intuition and my ability to like see beyond what's going on in this world and notice that there are other things going on and that are in play, other energies that we're working with constantly. I didn't have awareness of that before until I truly went within and created some space. But now I just follow inspiration. So I don't take action unless I'm inspired to do so. So there were many times where I wanted to move forward with the logistics for this, because I felt like I would run out of time. And if it didn't feel right, I just did not do it. And I knew that eventually it would all come together. And sometimes all the things that I thought I had to do, I didn't have to, because somebody popped up like yourself, and said, "Oh, I'd love to help you do this." So, so it's like creating the space for allowing in that. But so that's kind of what happened when I received this idea. I was outside in my backyard on my porch. I was working and typing away on my computer, and all of a sudden I was filled with joy in this moment, because like the sun was shining and the wind was blowing and the birds were singing, and I was just like, wow, and it was like this partial rainbow in the corners. I was like, what is this? This is so beautiful. Like, I'm so happy to be here right now. And then a butterfly landed on my keyboard, and I was like, wow. I mean, I'm just like witnessing this beautiful miracle in nature, and I'm just like feeling totally connected to everything, just everything seen and unseen. And that's where joy is. It's in that knowing of being connected. It's the knowingness of that connection. And so that was the divine inspiration. It's like, share this. I'm like, well, how the heck am I going to do that? And so, but then this came about as a result. So it was divinely inspired. It wasn't something that I chose necessarily, but I'm so happy to be the vessel for this. So.
And thank you for being that shining example. Thank you for the courage that you have shown and continue to show. And thank you for making our connection more visible through doing this work inside and outside.
Thank you so much, Todd. I appreciate all of the work you have done for this summit. I couldn't have done it without you, and I'm so glad that our paths crossed. I'm so eternally grateful for that.